Hello and welcome. And I know it's been a long time, but this is a very big episode, at least for the Money Talks team and for the Show Me the Money team. This is episode number 50. And it took us a bit of time. We had to find just the right guest who could probably summarize everything that we have done in the last so many months, interviewing so many different guests. So I think we now have the perfect person that could commemorate these 50 episodes. With further ado, uh, Shinjini Kumar, she is the founder of mysaltapp, but I think there's an entire story behind ये नमक किस तरीके से पाया है. So Shinjini, welcome and thank you so much for being our 50th guest.
Thank you for having me here, Anirudh. Really wonderful to meet you and the team.
Wonderful. And so Shinjini, actually is so odd when we spoke to each other for the first time. It was just like somehow we know each other. Like how do and like you were also like, how do I know you? Right? And it was very interesting. There's that we both know the same founder, right? And she used to work with you back at Paytm Bank. And that that person is Prerna. In fact, Prerna was one of the first, I think, 5 or 6 guests on the Money Talks, and we had a great conversation back then. But I mean, it was so odd. We've actually spoken to each other when we were doing the due diligence for Prerna, and you said some amazing things, and how and so serendipitous that we catch up with each other, a couple of years later. Can you hear us?
I can hear you well, but there are messages in the window that says there's a lag.
Oh, but hopefully, let's just keep going. I think we'll figure out the issues as they come. So, Shinjini, let's talk about your journey. You've got a very interesting one. You started out, in a small village in Bihar, and you were studying English literature, right? And somehow ended up at the RBI. Now, this is not a story that is very regular, right? So, if you could tell us what was the upbringing like, and how did you land up at the RBI while studying Shakespeare?
So it's funny. I actually grew up in a village and a very small place where my mother, taught in a school, and what happened was that the only exposure that I had to the world was through books. So I was a avid reader. Of course, I read in Hindi. We had a very good library. My parents were very fond of reading. We read a lot of translations and translations of world literature. So I always wanted to step out and see the world. So I always say this, that the newspaper was my internet, because the only access I had to the world was through books and imagination, but also through news. So I wanted, somehow I developed this desire in me to become a journalist and to go out and see the world. So when I went to college, which was again not a very big place, but it was the capital city of the state, which is Patna, and that was for my plus two and college. So I just signed up for English literature. So I was this girl coming from a Hindi medium school, not knowing much, but I signed up for English literature because somehow Hindi was the language that was keeping me to my boundaries, and English was the language that would make me see the outside it. So I went and signed up for English literature. It was interesting. That's a long story, but the short part of it is that I actually did well because I think I had very solid grounding in literature. So the language is what I had to learn, but I picked up very fast. And then I went to Time Center for Media Studies to do my journalism in Delhi. As it happened that because I'm a Bihari, all Bihari bright kids have to write some exam. My brother was writing civil services, and he brought me this form and he said, "You'll never pass, but if you pass, you'll always live in a big city," because that was the RBI.
I'm guessing he's an older brother.
He's an older brother.
All older brothers are bullies.
Yeah, and because I was this English literature arty kid who was doing, plays and skits and music, so he just said, you're never going to pass, but if you do, then you'll live in a city. So I went ahead, I wrote the exam, and by the time I finished my journalism program, I also got the offer from RBI. I went to my editor. He was nice enough to say that you should go and take this up because this is very big, because he knew more about RBI than I did. If he had advised me the other way around, my career would have been different. But that's how this whole bridging between, village and English literature and finance happened. Yeah,
But
that's
that's
how it was.
amazing. Like people study up for the exam. They sacrifice so much, and you just go out and based on a challenge,
Yeah.
write an exam, and then you ace it and end
Yeah,
up with the
I am still convinced there is something wrong with that exam because I have no background in economics or anything. Yeah,
Maybe we need to file an RTI and figure out exactly हुआ क्या था.
yeah,
But tell us about the RBI. Because unlike what you would like me to believe, you spent 17 years at the
Mhm.
RBI, so you were obviously pretty good, right? Or more than good, because 17 years is a really long time. So, what was the responsibilities that you had at the RBI?
Actually, in the bureaucracy, 17 years is not a very long time, and really, you don't have to do a whole lot to hang on. But I have a lot of respect for RBI because, oh, that's a picture from our, maybe the first week of being there or first couple
Oh
of weeks
wow,
of being there. Yeah. So
you are the
RBI
one in the blue sari, I guess.
I'm in the last person in the short hair blue sari. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So I was, we had joined and we were sent to this Reserve Bank Staff College in Chennai for our induction program, which was all of 6 weeks, and then we had to go and do 6 months in Bangalore office in my case, and then again go back to staff college. It was a very long period of training and learning, and I have a lot of respect for RBI because they do actually give you exposure to various areas of central banking, and in my case, I think I was also very fortunate that early in my career I got to handle FDI in India, which was the very exciting years of 1994 to 98, and I was this bright-eyed, curious child from a small place who wanted to know everything about the world, and the whole world was coming on my table because India was opening up, and people were bringing proposals to do joint ventures so I used to handle joint ventures and technology transfer and FDI. So people were bringing proposals for everything from Pepsi, Coke, Mitsubishi, Honda, CL, Vodafone. Like all of these companies were coming to India at the time. PVR cinemas. So I have this very interesting history that I should sometime write about that phase of liberalization and how laws were being relooked at, and I became a part of that process, and I think that was a very exciting thing for me.
Just a second. It seems like
Are
my mic
you
is
are
not
you
working.
facing tech issues?
Yeah, one sec. I'm just having trouble getting this thing charged. Is it better now?
Okay, so yeah, I
Yeah,
hope it
no,
gets
good.
sorted.
I think my charger. One sec. I think my charger is going off again and again, and this laptop is suddenly becoming. One sec. But
Yeah,
Shinjini, while we continue, so tell me,
yeah.
like, what was
So
you you had
I'll
you
just
had
complete
also an
that.
experience of
Yeah.
yeah. Please go ahead.
No, so I'll just complete that. So I think, in RBI, you always have these mandatory departments. So I worked in the what used to be called issue department then and is now called Department of Currency Management. And then I worked for a long time in this foreign exchange, FDI, etc. And then I went to the US to study. And when I came back, then I was in supervision. So then I had a longish stint of 7 years or something in the supervision department, both for non-banks and for banks. So that was pretty much my career in RBI.
You also took up some role with the payment side, right? That's what I heard that you took
The,
you, and that's how
no,
your interest.
the payments in RBI. In fact, I left RBI in 2007,
Hmm.
and the whole payments thing had just started. So I had zero exposure to the whole payments thing when I was in RBI, which was the reason that when I stepped out of RBI, I made a career in it because I wanted to do something new. I didn't want to do the same thing that I was doing in RBI. So even though I knew a whole
Acha,
lot
acha.
about banking and FDI and all of that stuff at that point of time, I wasn't interested in doing too much in that space. I was interested in doing things that I hadn't learned in RBI because I was like, if I loved RBI so much, I would still be there. Why will I come out if I want to take a leave? So not that I didn't. I mean, I did a lot of work on banking, but payments became a very passion area for me because it was learning.
And you know, one more interesting thing that I remember that you were talking about was that, you know, you were probably on track. At 17 years, I mean, you're on track to become a deputy governor. There's obviously a lot of good things, maybe a couple of books later on in life, kind of scenario, and you somehow decided, ki, you know, that's not the life I want to live. I want a bigger challenge. What was that?
It wasn't bigger. I guess becoming a deputy governor of RBI is a very big challenge, and especially
You
the
just
way
make
the
it sound like it's nothing. People get scared when the deputy governor comes on or even a a deputy or a governor comes on TV, and you're making it sound like it's okay, like it was all
no,
okay.
it was a very big responsibility, and I did take myself fairly seriously to prepare myself for it, because when I went to the US, I studied public policy. I
Correct.
built my courses around central banking, and did because I felt that deficiency in me when I was in RBI, that I was an English literature student and I was managing, but I really didn't have that core understanding. So when I went to study, I did sort of prepare myself for that, and that's why I studied public policy. But and that's why I came back to RBI, and that's why I worked in banking supervision, and I looked at non-banks and banks balance sheets and businesses. I used to do inspections. That's what it used to be called those days, supervision department, and I used to be the what used to be called principal inspecting officer, and look at banks, everything pretty much.
Acha.
So it was a job which I took very seriously, and I did think of it very highly. What ended up happening for me was that because I'd come from this small place, I have this phobia of being bored and of being constrained. So the moment I feel like I can't step out of something, I have to step out. So I once this friend of mine in Mauritius said this very nicely to me. She said, you have what people on islands have, that they must always step out, because even though it makes no difference, you live in a house whether it's on an island or whether it has land on one side, but apparently island people have this longing to step out. So I guess I had something like that. So when I came back from the US and I had a relatively stable stint, by the time the kids were also growing up, my husband was doing assignments abroad. He was spending time in Germany, London. He's an academic and a writer and stuff like that. I was meeting very interesting people with him. I could see that life outside had a lot of interesting things that I was missing out on, because I had this relatively pre-set career. And so I was willing to try different things. As I said, I have this paranoia of getting constrained and bored and limited.
And so after 17 years, right, at the RBI, is there any takeaways? Then what is the maybe two things you took away from that experience that you still, think in many ways drives you or makes you who you are today?
Oh, many things. Actually, as I said, I have a lot of respect for RBI because I learned so much and they let me be who I am. They didn't really change me and make me something else, which I think is a big deal for organizations to do. So, in that sense, I really respect them. But the second thing that I always tell people is that I'm impress proof. Like when people try to impress you, no. So I was
Mhm.
this young person sitting in RBI, and practically everybody who came to meet me was trying to impress me, right?
Right.
Trying to somehow make themselves memorable for the next visit, or mera kaam jaldi ho jayega if I'm
Correct.
able to improve her thing, right? And so that makes you start to focus on the issue and not on the person. So it really didn't matter whether, in those days it used to be Arthur Anderson that used to handle a lot of FDI cases, or KPMG, or these used to be the people. So it really didn't matter who came from that organization, but if the case had merit, if it required urgency, it would need to get treated urgently, right? So I developed that knack sitting in that place. So even now, when I have these, sometimes and of course, after I left RBI, I went through a phase where it was the other way around. Nobody wanted to impress me. I had to go and impress people. I was the person who had to sit across the table and try and impress people. I'm back to that position now as a startup founder. I'm now back to that position where I have to impress people, right? But for a different times in my career, I have been in those positions where I've been a boss, right? And so people come and try to speak a lot of English, and say a lot of things to impress you. And I'm like, I am impress proof. Don't even try. Tell me the content. Tell me what is it that you're talking about. I'll know. I know how to get to that. So I have that auditor's eye. Like I know where to look. I don't spend too much of my time trying to, sort of
So
get
in many
everything.
ways, RBI allowed you to prioritize or what is exactly important about the situation versus the situation or the people in it, in that sense.
Yes, I think that happened. So very zoomed out. I think that zoomed out person that I still am comes from there. And at the same time, as a central banker, no, you'll always have that zoom out and zoom in because suddenly you're
Mhm.
sitting in front of the deputy governor, and they may ask you something very specific about a particular bank's particular return, particular period. So you needed to be that zoomed in person, but at the same time, because you're constantly looking at the bigger picture, so that's a peculiar thing that I think happened to me because that was my first job and I did it for a for a fairly long period of time actually. So I have a lot to be grateful for to RBI, but the basic thing is that principled, the idea of not being scared. Like I have no fear, and I think that no fear comes from RBI because there was no reason for you to be fearful of anyone. Like, your transfers were not in your control, your promotions were not in your control, only your day to day performance was in your control. So you learn to not bother about unnecessary things. So I'm grateful for a lot of things. Yeah, that's a picture of a colleague of mine and me when I was in RBI. Yeah, very
Wow.
fond memories of you because when you are young, when you have your kids, they all live in this colony and other people have kids the same age, so you make that type of friends which you don't make outside of it. So yeah, lots of very good memories.
So, when it comes, let's say, to the youth, right? And many of them today are opting to probably not go for civil services or not opting to go for even work for MNCs at this point. But would you encourage, the youth to actually take up a challenge at places like the RBI, work in the government?
I'm going to tell you something which I've never said before because a lot of what I have spoken to you so far, I have said before to at various places. But when I went to the media, to journalism, to Time Center for Media Studies, one of the things that really occurred to me very quickly was how people, most of the senior journalists that I knew came from
Mhm.
much more privileged background. They were children of civil servants already. So while I was coming from a background where our aspiration was to be, not mine in particular because I was a bit crazy, but pretty much every child in my setup wanted to become a bureaucrat. I could see that bureaucrats' children were opting for this career in
Hmm.
journalism, which was not a well-paid career or whatever at that point of time. But obviously, they were starting from a place where they didn't need to think about the basics, right? They had the prestige, they had the connections, they had the probably the house in Delhi or whatever, and so now they were working here, and it gave them that. And journalism used to be very different those days than what it is today. So they were opting for these kind of careers. So I realized that. One of the things in this country is that talent is available in every place, but it always, the English speaking urban, metropolitan privileged kids, they always take something first, and then after some time that begins to go down to other people and they begin to
Percolate,
do
yeah.
other things, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, so first, in my grandfather's generation, the privileged people would be civil servants and the not so privileged, and then the smaller town kids started to come and become civil servants, and then their children will not be civil servants and they'll become filmmakers. And so, and of course there are exceptions to every rule, but pretty much that's how it works. So by the time I was growing up, the Biharis were writing civil services exams and qualifying, and my cousins who are 14, 15 years younger than me, they refused to do that because they all had this education that made them realize that doing an MBA was better, going abroad to study was
Hmm.
better, and things like that, right? So they opted for those things. But there are still enough kids in Bihar who are talented and who are at that place where they will write the civil services exam, they'll qualify. Even today, if a girl from my village comes to ask me for career advice, I do tell them that write a exam. If you
So,
if you think you can pass it, then get into a bank. It's better for you to write an exam and get into a bank, and then after that figure out whether you like it or you want to do something else, rather than take your parents money, go and do an MBA, then fight for placement, may not be speaking good English, like hundreds of things come into
yeah.
play.
Makes
So
sense.
I definitely don't have anything against. In fact, I think it's a great enabler for you too, because you get a certain level of step up. I did. I definitely think I got a level. Like I was coming from Patna. Who cares for Patna Women's College? I was once traveling in a train where there was a bunch of boys and they just kept making fun of Patna Women's College for some reason. And I was by that time I was like fairly senior, but I was just listening to that and thinking. So that so it does give you a step up,
So
and then
I
you can
mean,
decide what to do with it.
maybe I should flip the question. Also, is that, like, would you encourage people that are what I won't call them government servants, but public policy professionals, right? Would you ask them to take up entrepreneurship, because they come from a, what I'm trying to say is, it's the government is always looked at as being slow and lazy and behind the curve, right?
That's already
But
a trend, no? Anirudh, that is already a trend. In fact, in our children's generation, I was
Mhm.
a very early Indian student who went abroad to study public policy. So in my
True.
generation, I didn't know many people except bureaucrats who went and studied public policy. And I was also a bureaucrat. That's how I knew about the program. That's how I did it. But now, if you see a lot of children of my kids' generation, they are choosing to study public policy, and they are doing very cool things with it. I mean, one is of course
Hmm.
they're working with the government, which is what you said, because they understand that the government has the ability to make large impact, and the government is also much more open to working with private individuals compared to what they used to be. So all of
True.
that good stuff. But there are some really other very cool things that people are doing with public policy education now. Today, in fact, my husband was speaking to a young friend of his who who started his career with Transparency International and then with Integrity International, and now he's set up a startup. So in this entire space of transparency and data protection, and because all of those things are about engineering, but they are also not about engineering. They are about people and data and their lives. So there's a huge opportunity to bring that humanities together with this idea of making businesses. So in fact, that is actually a very important point that you raise, and definitely people should be encouraged to take those careers.
Wonderful. And then I think then you decided after the stint at the RBI, you decided to join PwC for a short while. And I know, without I mean, there's a lot of things you did, but I think there was one very key thing you said, that when you got there, there was a mismatch in a way of what was expected of you and what you wanted to do, right? And
Yeah.
that, I think that would probably summarize the experience there. So if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's funny, when I stepped out of RBI, I first went to Bank of America Merrill Lynch, and that was a compliance role. Even though I didn't fully understand what compliance meant, I went in because I had interacted with compliance professionals as a supervisor. But once I got there, I didn't like it at all for various reasons. Because again, regulation. I'm not a rule-bound person. I actually hate rules. I'm a very rule-breaking type of a person. So suddenly, from being on the side where I could actually challenge rules, I was suddenly being made to follow rules, and I wasn't very happy about it. So anyway, so then I went to PwC, and it was a very exciting time. And PwC actually did something very cool at the time, because this was after global financial crisis. So they had identified regulation as a big bet, and they went around the world hiring people that had that regulatory expertise, etc. So they hired me along with some 15, 16 other people across the world. So we were kind of privileged in that sense. But so I was happy to be hired, and I was happy to be in a place where I had the relative independence to do what I wanted to do. But then when I realized that much of what I wanted to do fell in that same space of regulation, especially banking regulation, because post financial crisis all
Yeah.
our global clients wanted assistance on a certain type of things, KYC, AML, and just pretty much the same thing. I then started to find it the same way, that same constrained, boring, sort of space, which I always run away from. So I was about to run away from it, but what saved me at that time was actually payments. So I quite accidentally, one of my senior partners, who continues to be a very good friend and mentor even till date, he's also an investor in my company now, and a great guy. So he actually took me for a meeting with Nokia, because Nokia had asked him for some advice on setting up a financial services company in India, and he had no clue on what that means. So he just said, you come. And that meeting almost sort of changed my consulting career, because Nokia wanted to actually set up mobile money, based on their Africa experience. They wanted to set up something like that. And my whole understanding of payments and finance and mobility started from there. And the rest is history. But essentially, that got my consulting career a
No, no,
huge.
no. The rest made history. The rest is not history because I think this is where Paytm Payments Bank comes in, right? And I think you had a chance meeting with VSS, and I believe that the first meeting went on for far beyond what the time that was scheduled for it, and but at the end of that meeting, it led to a job offer. So, which is like I said, it's not just any kind of history. This is history getting made. So, yeah, I would love to hear
Randomly,
about
my
what
my
contributed.
or most of my job changes are like that. So even my joining PwC was serendipity. So the same partner that I was telling you about, Vivek Mehra, he
Mm.
met me at a Bank of America Merrill Lynch board meeting, and you know that led to conversations, and that led to my hiring in PwC. And then while I was in PwC, I went to Paytm to pitch for their account, and then of course Vijay and I got talking, and we had a very long conversation about everything, about our backgrounds, what he wants to do with the bank. And I always think that, I mean, I remember distinctly the passion that he had about what he wanted to do with the bank, and that tagline, which I really loved, which was no fear, no greed, no entitlement, because essentially that's kind of that was a very attractive pitch that he had. And yeah, so I ended up joining Paytm Payments Bank because my partners in PwC were very gracious, because
Mm.
I was very grateful to them, because they had given me I had a 5.5 year career in PwC, and I had the initial couple of years were them investing in me, I making mistakes, and only after that I was making money for them. And so I felt a little bit ungrateful about leaving so early. But they were very nice. They said this is a great opportunity, and it's something that you should do. So I went ahead and did that. And I really, like, I can't take names because I don't know if people will know them. But yeah, I've been very, very fortunate to find really good mentors at different stages.
And you took
But
on a
that's
very
also
big
because I
job.
ask. I mean, that's also because I just go and ask people. I don't
Yeah,
like to do that.
you can't get unless you ask, right? I mean, we all go to the temple and ask for things. We can't really get it unless you ask for it. But why was this whole this Paytm Bank thing? This was like a challenge, right? Because I think even Airtel was creating Airtel Payments Bank at that time, and this was relatively a new concept, the payments bank system. I think the RBI put a lot of restrictions on it, on how much you could have. So it really led to maybe just microtransactions. It wasn't really something that's going to be mainstream because the transaction limits were quite onerous. But you still went ahead and you decided to go ahead with the bank. So what were you trying to I guess capitalize on at the time?
I've always looked at life only from a perspective of saying, what can you make of this? Like, I always talk
Hmm.
about this blessing that my grandmother used to have: make the most of what you have. So I've never really thought about things that I don't have. I've always made the most of what I have. And one of the things I have always felt very passionately about is how the majority of Indians, and when I say majority, I mean by numbers, the majority of Indians live in unprivileged circumstances, right? Clean, whether it is water, whether it is air. Of course, even privileged Indians don't have good air, so I'll park air aside. But every kind of scarcity that they face, and yet they make very respectable lives for themselves. So when you
Hmm.
walk into their lives, actually, you find how respectably and pretty much most of the time ethically they live, and create, and how much fortitude they have, and especially the women. And because I come from that background, and because I know many of those people personally, I've always had this respect for being able to do something for a very large number of people. So even though payment banks were constrained on credit, frankly, by the way, I'm not even a huge believer in credit being the most inclusive thing, even though you understand the need for credit. But in this country, we still haven't solved the problem of basic savings for a large number of people. And even
Hmm.
today, and I'm saying this even today, despite the Jan Dhan Yojana and everything, I think there is still the need for a very basic, good banking product for a large number of Indians. And I was very convinced at the time that the way Dr. Rajan was looking at payments banks at the time. He was taking the risk of lending out, like, and then he was willing to give them the rein on the liability side. And I thought
Hmm.
that was very interesting to start with. And of course, you could always tie up with an NBFC and facilitate lending. In any case, the largest number of poor, particularly women, had access to microfinance. And at that point of time, microfinance was not starved of capital. I
Sure.
mean, it soon did happen, but at the time it wasn't. So I could see that there was a very, very good business plan. And why just that? Even on FX, right? The largest volumes of foreign exchange that came into India from these retail, remitters from Middle East, and all of those things have changed. Many of those things have changed now, but at that point of time, a lot of that money that came went into cash, got converted into cash immediately.
Correct.
So saw a really big opportunity in just being able to take that cash and convert it into a bank account. And that bank, because you remember, I was in the bank, I wasn't going to
Hmm.
convert it into a wallet. I was going to, my business plan was to convert that money into a bank account. And the moment you convert something into a bank account, it does give you profitability. So it was
Correct.
actually a very good business to some extent. And I understand a lot of people will argue with me on this, saying cost of acquisition is high, unit economics doesn't work. All of that was true. But if you think about when I joined Paytm, if there were already, 120, 200 million users whose KYC was being done or the infrastructure existed, from the bank I didn't have to really bother about that. So it
Right.
was not a, it was not a sad situation at all. And I know that there were many other payment banks for whom it was not the same situation, it would have been different. But Paytm was a multi-product company, it wasn't a single product. So one, it wasn't like they were just going to do a KYC for my bank. So
Correct.
there were
Correct.
many things that were working for me at the
You
time.
also, I mean, the current thing you're doing with Salt, you also had some sort of a personal target at Paytm Bank, uh, which was, maybe you could say,
Yes.
is this early indication of what we're going to build later on in life, like which was to open up, I think, 2 million women accounts.
Yeah.
Was that 2 million
Yeah.
or 20 million?
No, so my original business plan in the bank was to make a large number of to give a large number of women basic banking accounts, because at that point of time that really was a need, and it was possible for us to do it given the infrastructure that we had. Of course, we had other challenges because a large number of these women still had feature phones at that time, but we were still counting on the fact that people would gradually upgrade, and there were various ecosystem factors at play there. So yes, I did go personally to study, these communities of women in Rajasthan, in Bihar. I traveled a fair bit to understand what were those habits and what could be done, and at what level this money could actually get converted into a bank account for a bank like that. Yeah, right now our plan is a bit different because obviously we are not a bank, so liability side is not something which we
Correct.
are looking at, and we are starting from the more more affluent, because we're trying to solve a different problem. But yeah, that understanding has been very critical.
So then, obviously today was a big day for Paytm. I would, regardless of whether see what the stock price doesn't have anything to do with the fundamentals of the business or why the business is amazing. But did you have a chance to talk to VSS today and congratulate him?
Yeah, yeah, I did. I actually went there in the morning. I came from there. I did see him. Yeah.
What do you think about Paytm, and now that it's an IPO, it's a publicly listed company. It's a platform that everyone can now buy into.
I've seen other. I mean, I've seen people go through that journey, right, from being unlisted to listed, and then you know being responsible and accountable. It's a lot of growing up, right? In
Right.
fact, so it'll be interesting. I was remembering something very interesting. I was remembering he was wearing a jacket. He wasn't wearing a tie, but he was wearing a coat. And I was
Yeah.
remembering that once we went to meet Dr. Rajan, he and I think somebody else, Aditi, I think it was, and I'm trying to remember. He wore a shirt, but he wore jeans.
Acha.
Rajan was the governor. We went to meet him in the RBI building.
Is there a dress code? I mean, I didn't know there was a dress code. I only have jeans.
I don't know if there's a dress code, but I don't think I've ever seen anybody going to RBI for a meeting wearing jeans. So, and today I was seeing him, and at least 5 times from the stage, both him and Madhur and other people said thanks to the regulators and all that. And I was just, it was very interesting for me to just see all that.
That's a very interesting story. But before Paytm Bank really took hold, it became a big thing, right? You decided to move on to City. Like that was a pretty interesting and sudden shift. What was the trigger there? And we'll talk a little bit about City before we get into Salt now.
I must say that Paytm was one place where I don't even think that I did my best. So I also approached it with all of this passion and the idea that we can change the world and all that. But I think once demonetization happened and that whole emphasis on wallet and making it bigger and bigger was driving the organization. I think I was basically traveling every week from Mumbai to Delhi, but beyond a point I wasn't able to justify to myself why I was doing it. So I think City seemed like a really big deal at the time, and even in retrospect, because it was a huge learning opportunity, big business, lot of
But you made a solid impact while you were at Paytm because Prerna, who's heading Dalchini now, she has this flair for microtransaction, micro entrepreneurship for women. Like there's, you can see that in her. Like even and it almost is like I'm running a business, but I'm also running a cause, right? And is that something that you see that you do to people when you're around them?
I won't say that. I think Prerna is an exceptional woman. In any case, as are many women that I have worked with. So I've been very privileged to work with very, amazing women in particular, also men, I must say. But I think I wouldn't take any credit for that. If I take any credit for anything, it is that people who are different from the usual successful people, sometimes they see me and think that it is possible to be different and yet define, yet be successful in your own way. So I think that courage that, I could have been a deputy governor, but it's okay if I choose to be something else and I do this and I have fun, or I could have been something else and I choose to do this. I think a lot of I think people that know me, especially younger women, I think that is something that gives them a good, glimmer in the eye that, oh, okay, so it's fine, it's okay, I can do this, and I like that. I think that's the only thing that I feel good about, and that's the only reason that I share my story now so much. Like for a long time, it was hard for me to talk about being a Bihari and whatever.
But there's one last question before we get into Salt. I mean, let's talk about RBI, PwC, Paytm Bank, Bankam, all right, and then City, and then the startup bug bites you. Like it's like at the end of City, you could have literally walked into any bank and you had a really nice, cushy life. I mean, obviously, it would have been boring, which you didn't like, but you could have taken a challenging role at any one of these banks. HDFC. Yes Bank, many of these places, require the kind of flair that you bring. But yet you decided, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and become a startup, and I'm going to go into this. When did this whole startup thing catch up with you?
I think for that I'll give credit to Vijay. I think I am entrepreneurial. I am somebody who prioritizes future over past. That's just the kind of person I am. But I think Paytm, I should give credit for the fact that I was able to see what the future was going to look like, rather than I already knew what the past looked like, because if you remember, I joined RBI in 1990, and
Yeah.
those were the so I've seen the Indian banking system evolve from the 90s ka public sector bank Tandon Chore committee and all of that to the more modern, CBS driven private sector banking. So that I had already seen. Now with Paytm, I was seeing something which was very exciting because it was futuristic and it was very dramatically different from the past. It wasn't just an incremental difference, it was a paradigm shift. When I went back to City, I actually went back to validate my hypothesis that even a large bank putting in the right commitment, the right capital, the right technology, the right effort, the right leadership can do the same thing that these companies can do, because by the time I'd seen also the constraints that fintech startups have. But I guess, even though it was very interesting in various other ways, I did come to the conclusion that it really was very, very hard for the banks. I'm not saying that they'll never be able to do it, but it is very, very. So just today, somebody, in fact, on Twitter was talking about some US bank that released its report saying if they had to API, if they had to, do APIification of and build microservices in their for their entire business, it would take them 30 years, 30.
Wow.
So, and I can empathize with that, because just seeing my tech projects in city, everything that is regulatory gets done somehow. But you've seen what happened with data localization with
Yeah.
the card companies and everything. So just seeing that, I don't
I
think
mean,
I
creating fintech API providers themselves have become unicorns, right? Because it is a pretty it is a pretty complex business, and maybe the banks don't want to take the risk onto themselves. It makes sense to invest outside. And in fact, one of our portfolio companies is doing some fantastic work in that area. But I completely agree with you. I think there is that it may not be as easy for the bank to be nimble as we think, right? But then, so what was the idea then when you started Salt? Then Salt comes into being, right? You so what was the idea? What was the problem that you were looking to solve?
So actually, salt was not my idea. So I mean, the name was probably,
Acha.
I was one of the people that who contributed to the name. But the idea of building this fintech for women that would focus on, sort of building a community around finance, etc., was Chaitra's idea. She came to brainstorm it with me. We've known each other for since the time I was in Paytm, and I helped them when they were building Simple. Um, so we were just talking and just introducing her to people, etc. I had absolutely no idea that I would end up joining it, but because we were talking about it so much and we were thinking about the future, and then I started to think about what all it would entail. And of course, it was the lockdown. We were all seeing the disruption that was happening in society. I did a road trip from Mumbai to Mukteshwar. And I didn't drive. I used to drive, but I don't really drive so much now. But it was very interesting. We stopped at various places on the way. We spoke to different people. We went through 7 states. We stayed at 7 places. It was right in the middle of the pandemic, so crazy thing to do. But everything was convincing me that there are changes that will sort of drive us towards a future. So I wanted to take the plunge, and Aditi is somebody who had worked with me in Paytm. And as I said, I've been very fortunate to work with very bright women, and many of them, when they leave, they always say, "Oh, I wish I'd worked with you again." So once in a way, I pick up the phone and I tell people, "You remember you said that? What do you think about it?" And yeah, that ends up happening. Oh, this is my road trip. Yes, this is what I
Oh
did.
wow,
Mhm.
wow! You make a road trip, Shinjini, and it makes it into the papers. That's amazing.
No, I did. I actually wrote a blog for them, because it was a very exciting, very interesting experience, and I was sort of focusing on women and money and what's happening in different places. So this one of the things that I heard when I was in Gujarat. We stayed with a friend who's a very illustrious woman herself, but she said in Gujarat, apparently in the New Year, they give salt to each other. So they take a little bit of money and send their children to buy. So that's their tradition. That's how they start their new year. They throw the old salt and they fill all their vessels with, like, their salt vessel with new salt, because salt represents energy. So there is this whole mythology that I was collecting around salt and women, and so it was a real fun trip. So
So what
what
was
I'm
it
trying
called before Salt? Before you gave the name Salt to it, what was
no,
it
no. So
called?
we all sat down and brainstormed, and we had salt as one of the potential names, and that is what was happening at that stage. No, we didn't have a name before we came up with salt. We were just talking about money and women, and somehow I don't remember who first said it, but we talked about it a lot, and we came to that. Yeah. So it
So
was.
the problem we're trying to solve now is the issue, which is of the women's illiteracy with finance. Is that the right way to summarize that in a sentence?
We actually are building a fintech platform for women to buy financial products. I
Okay.
don't even like the word financial literacy for women. It somehow is very patronizing. Women have always managed money. They know, they understand. It's intuitive. That's why salt. They intuitively know how to get it right. It's just that you won't give them credit for it. It's like the chef comes and tells you to add this much of salt and this much of sugar and this much of baking powder, and you take them seriously. But your mom will just do that, and you will never bother. So yeah, so you just have to pay attention to it. I think what ends up with women is that because they do it intuitively and they don't pay attention to it, and when it becomes something which is big, they don't really they sort of let it go, and then I think they lose out in the process, and we would want them to take charge of their money. So it's effectively a platform for doing financial transactions of all types. But obviously, with the way we are building the journey, we want people to be aware of why they. So just now the product that we released is a money personality test, which you might have
Hmm.
seen. If you
Right,
haven't
right. I've seen a few of them. They're really funny names of
yeah,
what
and
people
it's
become.
not just for women, it's for everyone. And the idea is for people to basically understand what causes them anxiety, because fear is, I always say this, that fear is the fear of dark. If you
Hmm.
shed light on it, then the fear goes away, then you actually see what's going on, right?
So
And that then
true.
you deal with that fear. So money, that this anxiety and fear that a lot of people, particularly women, have about money, and managing their own money, and therefore they end up delegating it to their husbands or dads or chartered accountants, in case they are wealthier. It is like that, being in that dark. You have to put light on it, and it will begin to reduce. So we created that test so that they would get rid of that fear, and then we will keep on introducing products like that. But we don't want to call it financial literacy, because it's not like we are trying to teach you or tell you that if you don't
But
understand
why
English.
specifically? So are these products going to be differentiated products for women, or your usual,
No, this is everyone. So
everyone?
so we are designing for women. We are
Acha.
100% designing for. It's like normal financial system is designed for men. Normal
Hmm.
car is designed for man, right? But women still drive cars. Women still use
Correct.
financial products. We will design for women. If men still use it, good for them.
So when you say design for women, like how is that?
For
How
their
does that?
lives. So their lives are
Okay.
different, right? So, and
Correct.
I'll
Okay.
just take one very short example. Women end up prioritizing duties of care, right? So
Hmm.
many of them end up working, preferring to work from home.
Correct.
Or do different things from home once they have a child. Or like Chatra says she became an entrepreneur because once she had a child, she wanted to find a really good justification to leave the child and go out and work. So that had
Correct.
to be entrepreneurship. That couldn't be any job. So so that's a different way of thinking, and we want to build products that are made for that person. So that's where the design comes in. So we'll design for women, and I have a
So
hypothesis that it will
if
work for
I
men.
understand it correctly, you would say that the product designed for a housewife versus like somebody which is a work from home, female versus somebody
A
who's going out, they would
freelancer.
all have different kind of portfolios. Is
Yeah. So even a woman that is working today, like we found this very interesting thing. We did a lot of interviews, right? We did more than 200 interviews, and then we did some group interviews, etc. Yeah, if you ask a woman, what are you doing? There are three ways in which, if it's a stay-at-home woman or work-from-home woman, they'll describe themselves either by saying, "I'm just a housewife," or they will say, "I'm a at-home mom," or they will say,
Hmm.
"I'm on a career break." They don't. There's no one way in which everybody who's staying at home for the time being will describe themselves. But we don't pay attention to that, right? We will say she's a housewife, don't sell her equity product. As simple as that. Financial services is very simple. They don't give her a loan, she's a housewife.
Correct.
But actually that woman sees herself in three different ways already. So you have to know your customer to design for them. I have a feeling that financial services will not know their men customers as well, of the generation that you know
Hmm.
my boys are, for example. I don't think our current financial system will be able to design products for them, because they think more like women, asset light, not thinking of a 35-year career.
Correct. And
If
they're
you're
also requiring liquidity they always want liquidity that they can utilize for experiential travel. I mean, this is very
Exactly.
much.
Prioritizing experience, prioritizing relationship, prioritizing care. So, once you create good products, you will find takers. So we are
So
much more
are you
focused.
then pitching these idea like just to get a little deeper? Then would you also start pitching ideas to AMCs or to
Yep.
like maybe a small case to create something specific based on the number of people, and then obviously is that what the long term vision would be?
Yeah. So in the long term, yes, definitely to find the partners with whom we can make products to start with, because making products requires a whole lot of licensing, etc. But at some stage, yeah, you have to take the bull by the horn and go ahead and do what you have to do to make it happen.
So interestingly, you've got three women co-founders starting an app and running an app which is catering for financial products for women. But many us men don't understand how to run finance either. I'm not talking about me specifically because I run a fund. I can't say that. But many of us may not know how to manage our own finances. So why not have some men at the top?
So when we started, very good question. So when we started, we were talking about building this, and when we started to hire our first few hires, and they started to bring in their own questions, and that's when we realized that gender attitudes for this generation and onwards are fortunately much more fluid and much less rigid, and
Hmm.
therefore we needed to build that into our product understanding. So one of the reasons that the money personality test got released to universal crowds and not just to women was because of this kind of discussion that we have been having at the back end. And one of the reasons that you find these funny names of artichokes and cabbages
Yeah.
and sauce, etc., is because they're gender neutral. You didn't have to think about he or she or pink or green or whatever. So
There should
yeah,
have been
there's a
one
lot
Bombay masala pizza or something, right? There should be one.
of
I mean, there should have been one like you're a Bombay masala pizza. You can't decide whether are you Italian, are you Indian, what are you?
yeah, good. Yeah, good suggestion. Yeah, I should tell that to the team. Yeah.
So tell us about the target audience. What is your usual target audience? Because there's obviously a whole gamut of women when you think about even
So
the
we
woman
we
that is
will start
graduating and
with the urban millennial smartphone user, a woman who has the access to money, whether through being a freelancer or managing the family money or earning a salary, whatever. But have money, have smartphone, have the desire to get started on your own. So either you are new to investing or new to managing your own money, or you've been doing it but you've been doing with help. That's the initial audience, right?
so
Because
you would say the usual urban woman is what you would go after first.
initially,
At
yes,
this point.
but when we say urbanized, sometimes you'll find urbanized women don't just live in metros, right? Urbanized women also live
Yeah,
in
no, I'm
other.
saying the Indian woman, not the Bharat woman at this point,
No,
right?
I'll tell you something very interesting. This is
Uh-huh.
what you have to understand. This you only learn if you are me. So I studied in Patna Women's College, right? So Dehati place. But I had friends who had aunts who lived in the same city, who used to read the Life magazine even those days, who used to
Correct.
smoke even those days, who used to, have this lifestyle. So what I'm trying to say is that urbanized, especially for women, because men tend to migrate to with work opportunities and keep moving. A lot of women make lives around them where they are, and
Hmm.
then they make the best of it. So you will actually find urbanized, sophisticated women. So I have this relative, right? And I go to her house in Patna, and she orders everything from the internet, and she tries out things that I have never tried out because I don't have the time, energy, inclination. But she sits there and she has this desire to do it. She'll get all like super fancy stuff. So I've realized that it's a little bit of a fallacy to divide the country into Bharat and India on the basis of geography. But language, yes, I do understand that if English is a big factor, at least to start
Yeah.
with for us, we are starting with English, but we definitely think that we need to think in other languages already, like
But I also
even
believe that if you get a lot more focus initially, right, you try to go
yeah,
for a smaller set of users because if you try to go change the entire country, there's just far too many subsets to change, right? And I like the focus that you're trying to go after. What I mean, I'm calling it urbanized, but I understand the intent of what you're trying to do. But I think you need to really focus down on a beachhead
kind of
Because
a
then you
customer
know
base.
who you're building for, right? You can't
Correct.
just be, going round and round in circles and answer all questions. So, in fact, to begin to, Chaitra is the product person. I'm only learning all these things. So, like she said, I'm building for myself, or I'm building for Asta. Asta is
Yeah.
our, content head. So, you have to know who you're building for me, all of this is learning because I've always worked in institutions where there's always like a lot of projects going on for all the different
Like
types of.
I mean, I would like if it to be for my mother, or I'd like for it to be for my sister, right? Well, my sister runs a business from home. My mother looks after some of the family properties, but it's for even for them, right? It's a lot of information, especially with crypto now, and everybody's talking about crypto and then Bitcoin and Shiba and all this stuff. I think that there's definitely a need, and they're very different subsets of people when you think about it.
Yes, that's the idea.
So while you've raised a bit of money, right, to get this thing going, and you know, how did you choose your investor? Was this a conscious choice to go after? I want specific kind of investors who believe in the story, or was it it would like the color of money is green? It doesn't matter.
No, 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 no. That, of course, you can never say that. The color of money is not just green. I have a very fundamental belief that you do what you are. What you do
Mm.
stems from who you are, and capital is who you are. Your capital provider does get to determine who you become, right? So you can't just say that anybody's money will take me to where I want to go to. So that definitely was never the case. Yes, it did happen that we were very much in favor of bootstrapping for a longer period of time and then raising, but it just so happened that we did have some very good people coming up and asking, and some of those conversations didn't also work out, but some of those conversations worked out very quickly, and we did find some good people. It's just that we don't want to be talking about fundraising because it's like big deal. You do a business to do the business. You don't do the business to raise
When
money.
you've dealt with as many zeros as you have in life, I think fundraising is not really a big deal.
Not that. I don't think I can afford to. But yeah, I we could have bootstrapped till product.
But
That much.
sometimes, yeah, I mean, to your point, sometimes see the role of an investor is not just about the money that they give you
Exactly. I was
in
just
the
going
bank
to say
account.
that. It
Yeah,
was that we found the people who actually were adding value to our
correct.
thinking, to our
To the reach,
community.
yeah.
So
And
that
this was a very interesting question I asked you, and I'm bringing it back up over here before we move into a couple more things about sort. But you know, it very quickly people could get confused, or investors, anyone could get confused that are you trying to build an impact venture, are you trying to build a for-profit venture, right? Because like you can't do charity in business and business and charity, right? So how do you answer that question today? Like when, let's say tomorrow when you're raising a new round of capital, how would you answer that question? That listen, this is not a charitable business. This is actually a very profitable opportunity. Like how when I say charitable, impact doesn't mean charity. Obviously, I'm just saying that impact is usually regarded as having lower ROI, right? But in your case, you're saying that listen, while I'm creating this positive impact, this is in no way an impact investment, right? This is the positive impact is just an externality. The real business that I'm doing is highly profitable. How do you define that?
In fact, the problem with the entire discourse around sustainability is exactly this, that on the one hand you have this wonderful mythical vision of a sexy unicorn being chased by everybody,
Hmm.
becoming that pot of $1 billion size in 6 months or 6 weeks or 6 days or maybe in 6 hours going forward
Yeah.
or whatever. And on the other hand, you are trying to actually create a better world through what you call sustainability, which is almost like charity, which is almost like which is almost like you dumped all the good ideas into a really you know sad bucket
But,
of very
yeah.
sad things. Yeah. And how are you ever expecting to get a better world by creating that split? So I think anybody who has any sense or any vesting in the future of the world will have to come to this sane realization that the social good and economic good and political good also actually will have to come together. I sometimes just randomly stray into these Twitter spaces or Clubhouse just to hear people talk. And I'm quite appalled at how, and many of them are actually young people. They say things like, no, no, I have no views on it. I'm not saying positive or negative, but I'm just saying this is how I think.
Yeah.
Why? Why should you not think positive or negative? It is your responsibility to think positive or negative when you are talking about, either political views or the future of the sustainability. Or so why have we all run away from that? We all have very sexy views on becoming an unicorn and listing and p ratio, like, things that are somehow devoid from that value system. But the moment you walk into the value territory, everybody wants to first, wash themselves and say, I am value neutral.
Yeah,
That's
I am right in the middle. Like I have no opinion either way. Yeah.
and that's not how the world is going to get out of the mess that it already is in. So for us, I think, and as I said, we are lucky to find people for whom that split is not a concern. They don't want to bucket us into impact versus profitability. In financial services, like I have run financial services businesses, Aditi comes from financial services. It is very easy for us to, it's actually very hard for us to not make money. Like if you actually sell, the money will happen. You'll either have interest income, or you'll have commission, or you'll have money. But the hard part is to understand, how do you make that, for example, clear and transparent to your consumer. How do you build that trust with the consumer, that the consumer knows that you're not selling him just for the money, but you're selling him because
Correct.
we need this product. So those are the things that you need to be focused on, and then you will make the money. And I think investors also understand that. So because they also understand that they're not just funding a charity venture, so to say, right?
So I guess before we move into the rapid fire, maybe the last couple of questions. So where do you see salt? Like, what's the target? Let's say 5 years later, how many women should be, or not just women, but how many users should be on salt, and how many of them should be women? Obviously,
At least 10 million.
10 million. Wow, that's 1 crore. That's a good number.
But to get to that number, as I said, we will move from the current target market that we are talking about to a more what we traditionally know as tier 2. To me, it's very simple. You can keep doing this in the wealth space, but that will be a relatively small number. Then you'll go into credit, then it will be a relatively larger number. Then you'll crack liabilities, which is when the numbers will begin to get the largest. Whether that takes us 3 years or whether it takes us 5 years is a matter of various things. But yeah,
So do
we are
we
not
see a
doing
salt bank
we're
in the
not doing
future?
this to be a niche.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But do we see a salt bank in the future?
I mean, I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to attract unnecessary attention. But I will tell you this from my experience, that if you want to make the largest impact to the largest number of women in this country, you need the license that allows you to reach out to that largest number of people. And that license, unfortunately or fortunately, at this point of time, is the bank license. So I'm not putting out my business plan here, but I'm just telling you that if you are
No, but
looking
I
at
think
that,
it's something that is required. And
I think
to your
banking is in
point,
short supply even today. And with
yeah.
what is happening to public sector banks and to the current incumbents,
Why not
I
just even the private banks? I don't think all the private banks really cater to
yeah,
people like us, right? I don't. I mean, I'm disillusioned with the private banks. They seem to be as archaic as this, the public sector banks. So I think in many ways, I find SBI does a much better job than some of the other banks that tout themselves as startup friendly.
there is
Uh,
a gap in the market. There is an opportunity. So yeah.
So good. I think Shinjini, it's been over an hour. I don't think we realized the time, but I've got about 10 quick rapid fire questions for you.
I
The
have to honestly
format
tell
was
you, I have no idea what you're going to ask me. So
that's the only part of the show that nobody ever gets, right? So you can ask the remaining 49 people, right? They never got this part of the show, and I always come back with new questions. So even if you've gone back and studied up on what the question could be, there'll be a few surprises here and there. So, first question, I think Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, and Donald Trump are coming home for dinner. What is the plan?
I will run away. I'll call Vijay and tell him to host them.
So, Vijay, if you're listening in, if this opportunity shows up, you
I will
please
run
wait for a
away.
call. Uh, the Peter Thiel question. One thing that you know to be true, but very few people agree with you on this.
Oh gosh, I can't think of anything smart right now.
It doesn't have to be smart. Like you said, you just have to have an opinion.
Okay, I think women that work from home need to be remunerated. Very few people agree with that, and this
And
is
you say, when you say working from home, are you talking about like the housewife working
women
from home?
who,
Or just,
yeah, yeah,
okay, okay, fair enough.
yeah.
Because there are other women that also do gigs from home. That's why I was just
No,
to
no,
make
I'm
the.
talking about women who work at home. They're also working. It's not
I
that they're,
completely agree. I completely agree. I think that there's, but it, and
but
there,
a
but
lot
the
of people
only,
don't
yeah, I agree. I agree. That's it. So, name one mistake you believe every individual must avoid.
must avoid.
Yeah,
Um, don't be in the newspapers for you know doing something unethical. Like don't like we say now that when you go to sleep, think about what will it be if your name is in the newspaper next day
correct,
for the
correct, correct. Yeah,
so for me that's like a very long list because all my life I've been in very responsible positions, and that's something that yeah I think that's not one thing. That's pretty much you have to live your life
that's
thinking of
some
that,
really good advice, though. Some really good advice. So,
especially
on that note, name
yeah,
one Indian founder, an early stage founder. That's if VSS is out, right? Because I don't
yeah,
want VSS can't be
yeah,
in this list. But
yeah.
name one Indian founder who you think is absolutely killing it right now.
Right now
Yeah,
I
like any
don't
early
really
stage founder that you might have met or thought was doing a great job.
I haven't followed the why Lizzie Chapman.
Lazy Chapman. Oh, good.
Yeah. I just met her on Friday, and I think, and we were having this conversation about the credit gap in this country, and what will it take to give credit to that stage of people. So yeah,
And let's see. What is one app that you're absolutely enamored with right now? Like
I
something you're
was
using. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if I'll say enamored with, but I do actually use Paytm a lot. It could just be habit because I never even go back and see how much cashback I've got. I never scratch any coupons. I have no clue what to do on between third and fifth to get 100 rupees benefit. But I just use that app for everything. So I guess I've just gotten used to it. I find it very
That's
very.
one app that's always on your always most utilized on your phone.
I do.
Uh, let's see. What is one
But if you
startup
ask me
idea that
what do
you
I
have?
really love, sorry, if you ask me what do I really love as an app, it's
Yeah.
and I don't even know how to say it, Pinterest or Pinterest. What do you Pinterest, right?
Pinterest. Pinterest. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
I really love that app because I just built this home in the hills, and not that my home is anything like a Pinterest home, but I just use that app a lot. I really love that app. I love the way it interacts with you. I love the way it shows you things. So yeah, that's I'll say I love that.
Let's see. Do you have any favorite superheroes?
My favorite Iron Man.
Iron Man. Why? Oh my God! Like after all the men who said Iron Man, Shinjini, I didn't expect you to say
Oh,
Iron
you
Man.
have
But
no
anyway,
idea. You have no idea about my superhero thing. So I watch superhero movies, and so in fact my most how should I put it? I love Hollywood movies only because of their animation and their superhero movies. Otherwise, I feel or I think the normal movies they make are very normal, but this is what they do very well. Why? I don't know. Maybe Robert Downey Jr. or maybe just the character. But yeah, I do like Iron Man. I started watching superhero movies primarily because of my boys, but then I
that's
watched
right.
all of them, and then I developed this fondness for them. Yeah.
Let's see. Last two questions. What is one lesson that you had to learn the hard way?
The lesson that I had to learn the hard way is this is this I know. So for me, I can give up early. I learned that giving up early was my problem. So I learned to change that. And
Perseverance, I
and
guess.
and to give you an example, it was actually Paytm, right? I left Paytm in 15 months But
Yeah.
I had actually switched off way earlier than that, because in my mind I was like, this isn't going to work out for me. So, but that was a lesson for me to learn. Yeah.
And I think one last question, because I know you read. I'm sure you read a lot. But what's 3 books you would recommend to any founder?
Okay, so this is not going to be like a thing that you'll expect from me, but John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath. Have you read it?
No, I haven't
It's
read
a
it. No.
pure. Okay, so fine. So I love that book because every time I read it, I realize how much of it is about technology shifts. Because it's a book about when the motor car, when tractors got introduced and farmers had to move from American West to American Midwest to California, largely to become workers. And so the book is all about the movement of farmers to workers and how the tractor displaces them. It's about the machine, and it's about what the machine does to you. Every time I read that book, I'm really struck by how the best interpretation of the relationship between technology shifts and people is done by a person who is, I was considered to be a sort of a socialist writer. But that's a brilliant book, I think, for anybody to read. um, I just finished reading almost 20 books as a part of the Tata Lit Life jury. They were all business books.
20 books
So
and how much time?
20 business books over the last 4 months.
Okay.
And I didn't read, to
That is
frankly.
mighty impressive. That's like one like almost what, 16 weeks, 18 weeks,
Well,
20
yeah.
books, almost
So
more
I
than a
didn't
book.
read. Yeah. So I didn't read all of them like page by page. Some that I really liked, I read. Some that I. So there were some really good books in there. They will all be coming out now as a part of that series. So there's some good books in that. Um, which ones you must read? I'm not good at this recommendation thing. If I think of something, I'll tell you later. All my
Sure.
books are literary. All my books are. I read just pure play literature.
Shinjini,
So
I think I don't even want to take questions today. I think I have had an amazing time. I think I could not have asked for a better 50th episode. We've been through so much. It just seems like we've been talking for a few hours, but it's only been about 72
I will tell
minutes.
you one thing about me that you didn't ask. I write
Yeah.
short stories. I write
You
short
write
fiction.
short stories. Oh wow. Is there a
Yes.
blog or something where you write
No,
them?
I publish them in journals and stuff. I haven't done a
Okay.
collection, but I do. And my husband and I have this initiative called Indian Novels Collective, which is a
Acha.
translations initiative. So we have Indian literature translated in English, and we promote that. We have a website. It's called Indian Novels Collective, because we believe that Indians read a lot of bad English books just because they are written in English, but they don't read really good Indian literature, which because it doesn't get translated well. So I am very
Oh,
passionate about
interesting.
that subject. So that's why I'm not giving you my book
So,
reading.
are
But
these short? Are these short stories like fiction? I'm guessing these are fiction. Yeah.
and we started with novels, but we will go on to do other things. But at this point of time, we decided to. So these are all Gyanpeeth winning, Sahitya Academy winning writers whose books we are trying to put on. So we just now
Wonderful.
translated
Wow.
two books. Yeah, yeah. So
So the
they've got
website, and once again,
they've
just so
got
you
their
could
own
just
books.
so the people
Yeah,
could go to it. What's the website again?
it's called Indian Novels Collective.
Indian Novels Collective. So
Yes, Indian Novels Collective. Not for
INDIAN
profit.
NOVELS
Collective.
COLLECTIVE. Yeah. Perfect.
It's, yeah.
But like I
So
said, I don't think I have any inclination to take any questions from anybody today, right? Because I think I had so many questions, and it's been an amazing, like it's been a spicy and a namak bhari kahani, right? And so I don't think that anything else is required. But any final thoughts before we end for the night?
no, I want to wish everybody all the very best. We live in very, as I said, don't leave your opinions undefined. Don't sit on the fence. If things are not correct, then they're not correct. If they're correct, they're correct. Whatever. I think, yeah, I think people need to be more aware and more ethical and more. Sustainability is something that you should not be sitting on the fence on. You should never be saying, I don't understand whether there's global warming or not. Of course, there's global warming.
Of course,
in,
man landed on the moon. There's an
in
entire
my view, In my view, there is no global warming. In my view, there is no poverty. In my view, there is no gender gap. Don't say things like
It's really good. Perfect way to end the episode. Thank you so much, Shinjini. Everybody,
that.
we'll see you again in a couple of weeks with episode 51. Thanks for tonight, and we'll see you guys
Thanks,
soon.
Anirudh.
Bye.